This is Andy Tube. In this video I'm going to demonstrate how and where to put oil and grease on a Singer Model 327K. This is the Spartan version of that machine. I'm in the middle of doing a little series on it, making a playlist. But this type of Singer vintage machine is very common. When we look inside, you're going to see a lot of mechanics that are the same as many other Singer vintage machines. So if you're not looking for information on a 327 or 328 or 329, this still may be useful to you, this video. These are the products that I use. I use a TriFlow superior lubricant with PTFE. It's a type of Teflon. It seems that it first became popular with bicycle enthusiasts, especially the off-road bicyclists and long distance and trail riders, because it still hangs in there even when it gets wet and so forth. So anyway, that's what I use. You can buy it at hardware stores and online and bicycle shops and so forth. TriFlow. And for grease, I use a TriFlow product that's called a clear synthetic grease. It's also waterproof, and I like it because this is what you put on gears. And a lot of greases get thrown off of the gears and splatter around inside the machine, or as they age, they get hard. And believe me, these gears get very hot, and this grease can take it. It doesn't dry out. It doesn't. If it does get thrown on anything, it doesn't stain anything. It's chemically resistant. And this is a 3-ounce tube, and of course, I restore machines as a hobby. And this tube it's over a year old now. I'm just about out, but it goes a long way. And you may be able to buy smaller than this 3-ounce size. And with the TriFlow superior lubricant, you can buy bigger. I wanted to show this because the label's still pretty nice on it, but I usually buy the 6-ounce size, but you can see I've worn off the label. But anyway, with this, you got to be sure that you shake it good to mix up that PTFE. And you don't have to use TriFlow. Singer sewing machine oil that you can buy all over the world is that's fine if that's what you want to use. I think the TriFlow is a superior product, but there's other sewing machine oils also, and that's what you're looking for. Is you don't really want to use a household oil because of some of the additives in that are not good for the machine, and they can get gummy, especially with the heat. What may work on a kitchen cabinet hinge may not work on your needle bar driving arm. So just use a sewing machine oil. And in general, oil is going to be put where metal is moving on metal, and oil is not going to be put on gears. No oil on gears. And also, in general, oil is not used on plastic. unless the instruction manual calls for that plastic to have oil or grease. I would not put plastic on it. And that being said, let's get started here. You want to unplug your machine. See, so I'm going to unplug that. And this model doesn't have an on-off for the light, so okay, that's off. And since my machine is threaded, I'm going to remove that. So I'm going to cut the thread, and I'm going to lift up my presser foot to take the tension on it. And I'm going to grab the thread between the take-up lever and the tension unit and pull it out like that. Okay. Da-da-da. Now, on this machine, I'm going to start up here on the horizontal arm shaft. And this model, like a lot of Singer models, actually, they put these little oil ports with these kind of like little funnels in there. So for normal oiling, you don't have to take off the arm cover. You see, here's a oil port. Now these big ones are screw holes that hold the cover on. But down at the other end, there's 3 more of these oil ports. So there's 4 oil ports right up here at the top, very easy to put oil into. And let's talk about oil. If you use your machine a lot every day, you should probably oil it every day, these vintage machines. A lot of people talk about before they start a project, they oil their machine. If you're an occasional user, maybe you sew 1 day a week. Probably if you oil it once a month, you're okay. And if you don't use your machine a lot, you should oil it well before you put it away, if it's going to be sitting there for months. And then you should oil it well when you get it out of storage and before using it. And Singer has quite a few notes about when you're going to oil the machine like that, especially after it hasn't been used, that you oil it and you run the machine at a moderate speed for like 5 minutes to make sure everything gets moved around. Okay, and let me find one other thing that's important. I forgot. I'll be right back. Ah, found it. My oil rag. Because oil that doesn't go and stay where it needs to be is a waste of oil, and it just collects dust and dirt. So maybe you heard me shaking that in the background, shaking my oil. But let's take a look here at these this top port. I'm going to show you up close this first one, and you just need a drop. And one of the reasons I like this TriFlow is it comes with one of these little clear tubes, so I can get the tube in position and then gently squeeze or let gravity, and boom, I can put a drop of oil right in there. See that? I'll put another one just for you. Okay, and then anything that didn't go in the hole, I'll just wipe off. See, pretty easy, right? So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to do these other 3 just the same way. Get a drop of oil in there. And 1, 2, 3. Okay, and I'm going to wipe off the excess. Now, staying on this horizontal plane here, there's a couple of oil locations on the machine here that are very important and sometimes get missed. And one of them is right down here where the bed meets the upright. So here's the bed, here's the upright, here's the horizontal arm. And right there, there's a hole right in the crease, like, okay. And then if we look up here, right below this little cover plate on the horizontal, on the upright, there's a hole right there. That one gets missed a lot. And what those holes go, they go pretty far into the machine, for what you think. And there's an upright motor shaft up here with a gear on the top, and I'll show you the bottom in a little bit, but that shaft goes through bearings and bushings, and it has to have oil because it spins like crazy. It gets hot and it needs to have oil. So the way to do this, let me stick that in there, and I'll put my finger up against the machine here, so that when I don't know, can you see that? So that when I pull it out, you can see how far that tube is going into the machine to get to that bushing. So we'll stick it way in there and watch some oil go through that clear tube and get a drop of oil in there. Okay. And then this one down here, let's see how far it goes in. Yeah, goes in pretty far too. Let me switch hands here. So it's going in that far. Not quite as far as the other, but that's the lower bushing on the upright shaft. So we stick all the way in and watch the oil go through here. And you know, when you put this up, and if you let the oil drain out, when you go to oil something like that, you can't see it coming out the tip. But if you let the oil drain out of the tube, then when you're in there, you can watch as the oil starts flowing. I'm hoping that you can see it. Can you see the oil now? It's here, 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 like that. So that gives you an idea of how much oil you're putting in there. Now let me wipe up whatever little amount I spilled there. And now we're going to move on. I'm going to move the machine here and stuff, and we're going to go to the nose end of the sewing machine. You might be surprised how many oil points are there. Okay, did you see that? The little slide there? There's 9 oil points in here, so this is a busy end of the machine. A lot of moving parts here. For every needle stroke, there is a lot of moving parts here. So I'm going to remove this cover plate thumb screw here so I can take off this cover plate, and we can take a look in here. Some people call this the business end of the machine. Whee. Okay. It's a little hard to get some lighting in here. I'm going to use a pointer, but I'm going to point out that way up here on this connecting link, you see the metal is round and there's a flat screw going through it. There's a little oil port on the top of that round piece of metal, because you've got a metal hinge screw going through, you know, a metal circle, and it rides up and down on, right? See that? So you got your metal on metal. So we're going to put a drop of oil up in there. Now if you want, you can take your top arm cover off because we're going to be doing that later to put grease. But you don't put grease as often. You know, grease is a couple times a year kind of thing. So let's just see if we can get our oil up there. Another advantage of the tube. So I'm going to watch the little air bubbles and oil bubbles go up. I'm going to get that tube in position first, and then I'm going to tilt my oil bottle up and get some oil up in there. Okay. Now, one thing that I didn't do, because I just cleaned the whole machine and degreased it, you know, with crud cutter and everything. But what you would normally do when you took off that nose cover would be to take your lint brush or an artist brush or a basting brush or something, and you would brush out all the lint in here. If there's any lint, you would want to clean it all out. And if you have excess dried up oil from before, you can try and take your oil cloth and rub it off, even get a little alcohol on there and wipe off some of the excess from before. So when you're putting your new oil on, you want as clean as an environment as you can get, right? Okay, so the next place is on the other end of that connecting link. You've got like a rivet where these two pieces of metal that hinge on each other for the take-up lever, right? See that? And you want to get a drop of oil up there. If you see these little holes, they're easy to spot. They're black, you know, on silver. That's where you would oil it. So I want a drop of oil up there. Same kind of thing. I'm going to get my tube in position and then get the oil up there. And I'm going to, after everything is oiled, I'm going to be wiping up, you know, like excess oil. So, how am I going to show you this now? This is kind of a tough one to show. At the other end of the take-up lever is what's called a needle bar connecting link that goes from here down and connects to this, and that's what holds the needle bar. And that spins around as the counterweight spins around, and that's what you know, moves this needle bar up and down. And this like hinges on the front and spins on the front, but also right behind it, it goes into the big counterweight. So you want to get, there's kind of like two spots to oil on that. And the best way I found is kind of get it over here kind of on the left side, because you can see a hole on the top in the back, and then you can drop it right down on the hinge metal where the two are hinging together too. Now after I would oil this, I would run the machine, and then I'd wipe up any oil that I spilt, you know, or went flying around. So I'm going to get a drop of oil in that hole in the back, and then I'm going to get a drop where that hinges together there. If you look in your machine, you see there's a little short connection there, front to back, and you're kind of, the idea is you're getting some oil on each end of that. So we've done 4 of the 9 that are on the front here, and the next one is very easy. You're going to put a drop of oil at the top bushing of this needle bar as it goes right through this bushing right here. Okay, so I usually raise the needle bar up, and I really kind of put the drop of oil on the top of the needle bar, and then I'll just take it down like that and back up a little bit. So you're lubricating like the top half of the needle bar above the connecting link. So of course the next place that you want to lubricate would be the bottom part of the needle bar, where it's going through the bottom bushing on this vibrating bracket. So there's your needle bar right there. Whoop. Down here. Here's your needle bar right there going through that bottom bushing. So again, the needle bar I'll raise up, and I'll put a drop of oil on it, on the bar itself I like to do, but just in the area. And then I'll turn it down and up a couple times to spread that oil on the lower end of the needle bar and get it into the bushing well. Boy, it's like it's turning easy already, right? Okay, now on the other end of this vibrating bracket, you see all of this stuff here, and people tend to put a drop of oil up here, and they want to put oil here, because they see moving metal stuff. But actually, the only place Singer recommends putting oil is on this disc below the return spring. There's a little coil spring there, so when you're zigzagging and the cam pulls the needle bar to the right, when the cam lets it go, this little spring is what brings it back to the left, or vice versa. When it pushes the needle bar out, zigzag, that spring returns it back to the center. And they recommend to put a drop of oil right on top of that black disc, right at the base of the spring. So I think what they want is that spring to be able to be lubricated there as the mechanism goes back and forth on it. So we'll put a drop of oil there. Now, the other thing where we have a bar, we have our presser bar that holds the presser foot here, right? And it's going through the big supportive, look at that big heavy duty bushing there to support that needle bar. Look how it's like 3 inches, it's all solid steel. But the presser bar goes right through it. So raise up the presser bar, and right at the presser bar where it's going into the top of that bushing, you put a drop of oil. Okay, and then you can work the bar up and down to get that into the bushing. Okay, so we've got 8. Now the 9th one, to me, I do it, but I don't do it every time. What they say is you've got this tension, presser bar tension adjusting thumb nut up here. And when you turn that, it's got this extension pin that goes into the top of the presser bar. And inside the top of the presser bar, it's hollow, and there is a spring. And that's what makes that springy. So they say when you're oiling to put a drop of oil up here on that extension pin and into that hollow place where the spring is. And I do that sometimes, but as somebody who restores and has had to dig out a couple of inches of dried old oil out of there because the pressure bar wouldn't even move because the pin was glued in there. I don't do it every time. I just don't. You know, the needle bar's moving hundreds of strokes. The pressure bar, not as much. So I'm going to do it just like I did with the other. You know, put the drop there and get it down in there on the spring. But I don't do it every time. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Whew. All right. While we're up here now, I'm going to set up and we're going to take a look at the bobbin case area because there's 2 oil points in there that we want to oil. Okay? Okay, if you saw that little slide there, that's where we're headed. We're going to go in here, and I'm going to show you how to remove not only the bobbin, which you already know how to do, but I want to be sure, lift my pressure foot, my thread's stuck under there. I want to be sure that you know how to remove your bobbin case, because you always have lint built up here. So look, I'm going to turn the hand wheel until my thread take-up lever comes up all the way, because that'll bring my needle point up as high as I can. Right? And I'm going to leave the pressure foot on, but I want to take off the needle plate. And I'm just going to lift it on the side here. This side has a spring clamp, so this side doesn't. It just has a location pin. So I'm going to pull it up and slide it right off. Okay. And as I said, this has a let me get a screwdriver here. This has a little spring in there, and that keeps that clamp, you know, and holds the needle plate. And don't tell Singer, but every once in a while, even though it's not in their instructions to do it, I put a little drop of oil in there because it's metal on metal, and it sits there a long time. I mean, how often do you take off your needle plate, really? So I just want a little light coating of oil in there, and I don't do that every time either. Okay, that's our secret. So we've got the needle plate off now, and I want to get the bobbin case out because I want to get my lint brush and vacuum and whatever in here to clean this all up, as long as I'm going to oil. Why put oil on top of lint, you know? So this bobbin case positioning bracket right here has a little tab on the front. We're going to lift it up a little bit. It's kind of springy, and you're going to move it to the right about 1/8 of an inch to get the bobbin case positioning spring right here away from the bobbin case, so we can get the bobbin case out. So if you don't want to use your finger, you can use a screwdriver, and you can just lift that up. See? It doesn't lift up much, see that? And then just push it over a little bit. So see, before there's a hole in it, and the hole was right around that adjusting screw, and when you lift it up and move it, it moves the hole about halfway over to the right is all. But it makes it gives you about a 1/8 of an inch or so gap in here. Now we can move this bobbin case back end, slide it to the right, and slip it off the race. Then we can kind of pick up the front end fork and we can take it out. Da, 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 da. See that little fork goes on like a pin in there to hold the front of it. And then this edge and slot through here rides on this edge of the hook. This is the hook, this whole big round thing. There's the hook point, it's sharp. See it? So the bobbin case doesn't move, but the hook moves under it, so it has to have a place to go. So when you take out the bobbin case now, you want to clean it, and especially pay attention around the little tension spring area by the screws. Get any lint you can out and get that slot. If you got to put like a toothpick or something plastic in there, or a scraper, and if you got built up lint in there, you want to get that out. And this may be a good time to talk about canned air, compressed air. I'm not a big fan of that because I've seen, not so much in the Arizona desert climate, but where, you know, people go in there and blow the lint out and it looks good, and it blows all that lint into these little gears and hinges and metal, and then the lint can absorb moisture. So you've got kind of damp lint in there sitting in a dark place, and it can get rusty. So once this is out, I would have no problem. Actually, I usually just take it out and throw it in a little cup with, you know, an ounce of alcohol and just let it sit in there, and then I run it under the sink at high water speed, you know, and dry it and so forth. But you don't have to do all that. Just brush off the lint and make sure that the track is clean. Now you've got your needle plate and you've got your bobbin case out, so you can go into this area. Especially the feed dog teeth can get jammed up with lint. And if you want to take your presser foot, you know, just loosen the thumb screw and pull the foot off. But you want to go in here and vacuum. If you like to use spray, you should take the bottom plate off. And if you're going to spray air, condensed air, it's a very easy way to clean. But just try and make sure you're blowing the lint out of the machine. Like take the oil pan off the bottom, you know. So when you blow the air, it has a way to escape, and it'll take the lint out of the machine. That's all. So when you've got it all pretty, you may have noticed that right in the center of this hook shaft is a hole. And in the past, I mistakenly wonder why would Singer say to oil that? It doesn't go anywhere. Because I could take like a needle or a pin and stick it in there and say, well, it doesn't go any place. You know, it's only like that deep. Well, you got to put oil in there. And then you can look at the bottom of the machine. There's a little tiny hole that's even more shallow. It doesn't go through to oil anything. So I've even told people, don't worry about that, you know, because the bobbin doesn't touch it, or the bobbin case, so there's no. But one time when I was cleaning a hook shaft that I took the hook and shaft out of the machine, right on the side of the shaft is a little tiny hole for the oil to come out in the shaft bearing. Uh-oh. So that's why the hole is there, huh? You know, like, who am I to doubt the Singer engineers who designed it and said, hey, Andy, this is where you got to put oil. So it is important to put a drop of oil in that hole. So see if I bend my tube in there and squirt a drop of oil in there. Okay. Then when we go to put this back on, we have to have our bracket pushed to the side. Okay. And we're going to kind of go in a little downward motion, hold it tweaked a little to the right, because we have to go under the feed dog and get that fork on the pin up there. Okay. And once that front end is nice, you'll see, can you see how it'll swing right onto the hook race, the top of the hook there? See how easy that is? Okay, so we'll do it again. Right, go down a little bit of an angle towards the fork, get the fork on the pin, and this front edge, remember, it's just like a shelf, it's not a slot, so it'll come to rest right on the top of the hook. And then when you move it left, now that slot is going on to the race of the hook. And then you can lift your positioning bracket up and move it back to the left and drop the hole in it right around the screw. So now you've got the positioning spring for the bobbin case to bounce against, and then you can turn your hand wheel and make sure that, oh yeah, see how nice it's riding. It's not coming out or anything like that. Now the second place, if you saw in that slide, is right here on the edge of the race, right at the edge of the bobbin case. They say to put a drop of oil. And then as that hook oscillates underneath the bobbin case, it's going to oil the race and the edge of that bobbin case. Okay, so I'm going to plug this back in the machine, and now that I've got the oiling done, I'm going to run it. I'm not going to run it 5 minutes, but I want to run it a little bit to demonstrate to do that, and then I'm going to go in with a rag and a Q-tip if necessary, and wipe up any extra oil that I got in there. So we'll do a moderate speed here. Okay, I'll go ahead and unplug that, and then I'll just dab onto that little center of the hook there and any little extra, and then I'm going to lower my needle bar and presser foot, and I'm just going to wipe up any little excess oil around here. And especially if you don't have one of those little hollow tubes, you can get a lot of excess oil up in here dripping down, and it'll go into the bottom back here. And if that's the case, just grab a, like a Q-tip and go in and wipe up any excess that soaks up on the bottom there. Usually if you're semi-careful putting it in and then you just use a rag, you'll be okay. So isn't that pretty now? We've got the nose and the hook and bobbin case area. Oh, I guess we'll put this needle plate back on because we're finished now. So I'll rotate the, lift the presser foot and rotate the needle up out of the way, and then you're just going to slide that and just use this slot to kind of pry under the edge of that clamping pin. Okay, see, I just got it under the edge like that, and you lift it up and then slide it in there. Make sure it gets seated evenly all the way around. Okay, now the last of the oiling is the 11 points on the underside of the machine that we have to oil. So I'm going to reposition the machine again, and we'll start with showing you a slide from, as I have been from the instruction manual, and then we'll go about oiling the bottom of the machine. So I have the machine laid on its back so that I could access this bottom cover, also known as the oil drip pan. Although if you're getting a lot of oil dripping on it, that means you're applying too much oil to the machine. It's just one big thumb nut here. We'll take off and we'll remove the cover. And the nice thing here is it exposes the whole bottom area completely. And down here there are 11 places to oil, but it's actually pretty easy to get to everything. There's 5 on the right side and 6 on the left, if I remember right. And over here you can see the bottom of the motor and the motor mount bracket and so forth. But there's no reason to be anywhere near that with the oiling, and you don't want any oil on there in the area. So let's just start over here on this right side. I wonder if I could zoom in just a little bit here. Okay, so if I remember right, we've got this hinge stud here, and then on this hinge stud there's an actual oil port. That would be 2, and then on this hinge stud there's an oil port, 3. 4, and the bottom hinge, can you see that? Did I cut that out? The bottom hinge, 5. So there's 2 ports here, one here and one here, by where the set screws hold the hinge stud. And those are eccentric hinge studs to adjust the height of the feed dog and the position of the feed dog. So as I said, it's pretty easy. We'll just go right up here where the metal meets the metal on that hinge stud and lay a drop of oil. On this one you have a port, so you'll get the oil in the port. We'll come down, right below it is the other port. We'll get that. We'll get one on this hinge screw right there, that moving part. And then the last one we'll just lay where the the bar hinges on the hinge stud right there. Pretty easy. We'll come over on this side. There's 6 places here, and I'll start the top to the bottom. Okay, but you have that little hinge stud situation there, and then you have on this bell crank for the hook. You have a twisting point here and here on either side of this arc, and then one on this, just like we did on the other side. Whoops, I'll come down a little bit. One here, one on the hinge stud below. But then there's also this, let's see if I can move this crank a little bit, if it would show any better. No. Oh, there, it's coming up a little bit. Where this feed bar is going up and the feed dog is attached to it, there's a little moving figure 8. A little piece that looks like the number 8, and it's attached to the feed bar, and it's attached to the rocker arm. And where that attaches there, you want to put a drop of oil. So we come on the hinge up here, each side of the arc, that little figure 8, the hinge screw here, and then down below there's one more hinge on the bottom bar. See if I can, maybe that's a good spot right there. So like I said, I'm just going to start at the top, lay a drop of oil there, come on, there we go, and one here, and up there is an oil port. It seems like there should be an oil port on the other one. Let me rotate the hand wheel. No, you just lay it between the 2 pieces of metal here, but on top of this piece, back it back up there. Yeah, there's definitely an oil port right there. Okay, and then we've got our little figure 8 piece of metal I'm talking about there. And then we've got this hinge screw, and then down here just the hinge stud right there. Just lay some oil there, and that's your 11 spots on the bottom. Let me plug this in and see if I can run it even though it's laying on its back. I think as long as the hand wheel has clearance, it'll probably work. We'll just try, right? Yeah, I gotta get that hand wheel. It's laying on the towel, so it's not turning too much there. Maybe I can prop that hand wheel up off the bench. There we go. Okay, that should get all the oil around there. And then I'm just going to go in with my rag, because some always dribbles around. You know, it's hard to get every spot just exact. And you do not want excess oil in here, because it just collects dust and dirt and lint. So just like any other place that you oil on the machine, just gently wipe up any excess that went flying around or dribbled off. Very easily. Okay, so I'm going to stand the machine back up now, and we're going to take off the top cover, and I'm going to show you the 2 places on the horizontal arm shaft where you need to put grease on some gears. It's the only place grease goes on the machine. So we got to take a look at that. Okay, while we're up here, I grab a screwdriver. I pointed out these 2 screws in the arm cover before, so we're just going to back those out, It's just those two, and then the hand cover, the arm cover, will lift straight up and off of the machine. Okay, just like that. Now, I want to see, can I tilt this thing? What I wanted to do is, remember where we put the oil drops on the little ports up on the top? And I said they have like a little funnel and they drip down where it's supposed to go. Before I get to the grease, I thought I would show you that. So the arm cover sits about in this position, and let's see, let me grab my pointer. Uh-oh, I think I lost a screw down in there. I'll have to find that before I run the machine. So this was the oil port up by the nose end, and you see how it's right over this hole down into the bearing for the main arm shaft. So when you're putting a drop of oil in there, it's going in there into the main arm shaft there. And by the same setup, on this end there was a 3. 1, 2, 3. And that's going into the connecting rod right here, and it's putting a drop on the eccentric cam for the forked feed connector that does the feed, and the last port is going into this hole, which goes to the shaft bearing on this end. So of course that shaft goes all the way from the hand wheel right over here all the way up and through to the counterbalance that the take-up linkage is tied to. Okay, so that's where those 4 drops go: bearing, shaft, shaft, and bearing. Okay, and then also I just noticed something while I'm up here. Remember we were doing the nose, and I said when you're doing the needle bar and this linkage that there's these little ports. When you see the hole, that's where that is supposed to go, and there you can see one right there. There's one of the holes right there. So that gives you a good look of what you want to look for when you're in there to oil. So that little oil port right there is the best spot to oil. Okay, so let me fish my dropped screw out of there, and then I'm going to show you where to put this grease. Let's see, where did it go? I think, oh good, that was an easy one here. I think it just fell down right by the bottom of the camshaft. There we go. Don't want that getting caught in the camshaft gear, right? Yikes. Okay, so 2 places. I'll show you the chart. Okay, so this is your a 90-degree gear setup. Down here, you can just barely make out the teeth of the gear on the vertical shaft that runs up. Remember we put oil on it down here and up here, vertical shaft that goes down to the bottom. Well, at the top of it's got a steel gear there, and it mates with this vertical gear that's on the main arm shaft, and that's how it gets power. So when the motor belt is turning the hand wheel is clamped to the main arm shaft that just moves everything, including this gear, which then turns the gear that takes the power down to the bottom of the machine. So we need to get some gear, oil. Whoa, stop. We need to get grease on this gear. No oil. We need to get grease along this gear, and then it will transfer down to the gear below. And then behind the pattern cam here, you can see the worm gear, right? That is attached onto that main shaft. That worm gear, you know what? I better turn this around some more so you can see down in there, maybe. So that worm gear mates up with the metal gear at the base of this cam stack, the camshaft, for the zigzag pattern. So we want to get some grease on there, and it'll transfer to the cam gear. Okay? Now, Singer used to sell this lube, and it was the same lube, I think, for their motors. Came in a little tube, and they said, yeah, you squirt on like about 1/4 of an inch of this grease, you know. And when I use this TriFlow clear synthetic grease, I like to use this little stiff acrylic paintbrush. I bought a cheap set of brushes, you know, that like Walmart. This one's fairly stiff versus, say, a watercolor brush, and I just put a glob onto there. Now you can use your finger if you don't have a brush, but I just put like a glob on there, and I'll brush it around on that shaft, on that gear. So we're greasing the gear, and then later I'm going to run the machine, and that grease is going to spread onto the gear. Now, if your gear looks in pretty bad shape, dirty and stuff like that, you can go ahead and take an old toothbrush and scrub it and turn it and scrub it, and maybe get some alcohol on there. You know, there's no sense, if it's in real bad gunky shape, to put fresh grease on top of the old. So use a rag and a toothbrush and brush out as much of that old gunk as you can. Like I said, a little alcohol, or I have cleaning videos on my channel, how I degrease the whole thing in place. But when you have it the way you want, just put a glob like that on there. I'm going to turn this one, and now that gear is kind of sharp. If you just use your finger to wipe grease on there, it's okay. Just the edges of it are a little bit sharp, so be careful. And then this worm gear to camstack gear, if you don't have a brush, that's real easy to just, let me get a glob on my finger here and I'll show you, you know, and then just come in there and like wipe it into the grooves of that worm gear there, and it'll get transferred to the camstack gear. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and run the machine slowly to spread this around. Oops. Oh, I'm blocking it with the piece of wood underneath is blocking the main drive shaft there. Just watching this make 2 or 3 full rotations, so I know that all the teeth of the camstack gear have been covered. The same thing with this, it's just going to spread the grease to the other gears. Okay, now you see right there, some grease has come off from the other gear on the bottom, has thrown up on there. So now that I've got grease everywhere on the gears, I'm just going to, you can use a Q-tip, or I'm just going to wipe it with this old, my oil rag, and turn it a little bit and wipe it off, just to get that excess off of there. Not off the gear, but just off the shaft. And then the same thing, I think I'll grab a Q-tip for this one so you can see better. On here, that worm gear, it tends to wind the grease and then go off the end a little bit. So I'm just going to pick up that excess and wipe it back on the gear. Let me turn it there. There's some of the excess right there is where it gets. See that collar with the set screw that's holding it. So I'm just going to turn the hand wheel and put that in there, that Q-tip, and just get off any excess, because I don't want it flying around in there and collecting gunk and stuff. I degreased the whole machine, you know, in the shower and everything with that crud cutter. It's like brand new and shiny, so I want to keep it that way. Okie doke. So that's about how to go about oiling and a little bit of grease on a vintage Singer 327K and a lot of other Singers. You get the idea now. You know, when the metal's kind of moving on metal there, look for a port. If there's a porthole, put a drop or two in that hole. If there's not, put it where the parts meet. It'll get in there. After you kind of oil the area, run the machine, you know, even for 30 seconds just to get everything spread around, and then go back in with your rag or Q-tips and wipe off the excess. Okay. Thanks for tuning in for the lubrication of a Spartan 327K. Hope it was worth your time, and I hope you come back and watch the future videos or some of the 450 some videos I've already got on my channel. Take care now.